In the pre-dawn darkness at 4:24 local time, 6 Ukrainian attack drones pierced the night above occupied Donetsk, racing toward a rail and road junction that served as a critical artery in Russia's supply network. Beneath them, rolling along the Debaltseve rail line, sat a 24-car train loaded with roughly 1,600 tons of fuel, enough to sustain an entire Russian armored regiment for a week straight. What the Russian forces didn't realize was that in just 50 seconds, that fuel would never reach the front. It would never fill a single tank, never power a fighting vehicle, never stock a supply depot. Instead, it was about to transform into an inferno, consuming the heart of one of the war's most bitterly contested zones. This meticulously orchestrated strike to sever one of Russia's lifelines required 8 unmanned aerial vehicles, working in perfect synchronization under a precisely calculated operational plan. Hovering roughly 6 miles from the target zone, an Autel Evo Max 4T reconnaissance drone served as the eyes above the battlefield. It monitored the Debaltseve railway line, tracked the fuel train's movement in real time, and fed live imagery back to Ukrainian operators. The Autel Evo Max 4T was purpose-built for tactical reconnaissance and target acquisition. Its quad camera system packed a 50-megapixel wide-angle lens, a 48-megapixel telephotos with up to 160 times hybrid zoom, thermal imaging, and a laser rangefinder. This combination allowed operators to spot the locomotive, fuel cars, and surrounding vehicles from a safe distance. Add to that a 42-minute flight endurance, 14-mile transmission range, IP43 weatherproofing, 720-degree obstacle detection, and air mesh technology for stable operation through darkness, downpour, and degraded GPS coverage. A second Autel served as backup. If jamming disabled the primary drone or severed its signal, the standby could immediately assume observation duties. Ukraine wouldn't go dark when it mattered most. 3 Ukrainian-manufactured FPV drones were assigned to deliver the actual strikes. Built for speed, precision, and stability during the terminal phase, these machines mounted 7-inch propellers on 2,807 brushless motors, each capable of generating up to 5.5 pounds of thrust. That configuration let them accelerate explosively, hold rock-solid, low-altitude trajectories, and exceed 140 kilometers per hour during the final attack run. By the moment they reached their target, separation between drone and train had nearly vanished. The defending crew had almost no opportunity to spot the threat, traverse weapons, or land accurate fire. And honestly, that's what makes small attack UAVs so dangerous in modern warfare. They're inexpensive, diminutive, and hard to detect. Yet when guided precisely, they destroy targets worth thousands of times their own value. 25 miles from the strike zone, inside a fortified operations center, Ukrainian operators watched the reconnaissance feed stream live across their screens. On the thermal display, a distinct heat signature began emerging from the cold, dark landscape of Debaltseve. The Autel's thermal sensor isolated the diesel locomotive cleanly. Its engine block glowed like a bright streak, while the fuel cars stretched behind it like a procession of targets along the Debaltseve tracks. In the final darkness before dawn, identifying the train was no longer guesswork. The reconnaissance drone maintained a safe distance, using its zoom optics and laser rangefinder to confirm the train's heading, speed, and exact position at the junction. The imagery streamed back, encrypted and unbroken, letting operators in the bunker observe the movement on the tracks as if they stood trackside. Once visual confirmation came, the reconnaissance operator transmitted the final go signal. The fuel train had entered the designated strike box. The 3 FPV control teams received the target coordinates, confirmed their approach vectors one last time, and prepared for terminal descent. From that instant, the Autel Evo Max 4T became more than an observer. It transformed into the guiding intelligence of the entire operation. Each Ukrainian-made expendable FPV likely carried a small penetrating warhead, weighing approximately 5.7 pounds, engineered for a single mission. Slam into the target and create catastrophic damage at the exact point of impact. This warhead didn't need to obliterate the entire train in one massive explosion. It only had to puncture the steel hull of a fuel car, typically 0.6 inches thick, and ignite a conflagration inside. Against fuel tank cars, a single rupture in the right spot could transform pressure, vapor, and temperatures reaching 2,500 degrees Celsius into a cascading disaster. But the real power wasn't the warhead alone. Timing was the decisive factor. Ukrainian intelligence had shadowed this train for hours through local sources, documenting its movement pattern, its transit speed through Debaltseve, and the critical 1 to 2 minute window when it would be farthest from Russia's primary air defense network. That intelligence transformed an FPV attack into a calculated surgical strike. The unmanned drones didn't rush the target haphazardly. They arrived at the correct section of track at the correct moment, threading through the correct gap in the defensive posture. When the 24-car formation carrying 1,600 tons of fuel had virtually no escape route left. After thermal imagery, zoom optics, and reconnaissance data from the Autel confirmed the target, the Ukrainian control crew initiated the attack sequence. The first 2 FPVs broke formation, descended, and drove hard toward the fuel train rolling along the Debaltseve line. During the approach phase, the drones still relied on preloaded navigation data, but in the final 10 seconds, the mission shifted. Now the FPV's camera transmitted live footage to the pilot's control goggles, letting the operator visually track the locomotive, fuel cars, and final strike angle. Hitting a moving train is far trickier than striking a stationary target. At 35 feet per second, even a marginal timing error during the dive could cause the drone to miss the fuel car or strike a non-critical section. So the Autel Evo stayed in its observer role while the FPV handled the riskiest work, closing distance, keeping the target centered, and diving toward the train's precise weak point. The Russian train continued rolling through darkness, completely unaware that in less than 30 seconds, its fuel cargo would become a sea of fire. At 4:36, as the first 2 FPVs entered their terminal phase, a complication erupted. Roughly 3 miles from the target, a Russian RB-301B Borisogolebsk 2 electronic warfare system activated. The Borisogolebsk 2 wasn't crude jamming. It was a ground-based EW platform designed to detect, suppress, and disrupt radio channels, control signals, and certain satellite navigation systems across the combat zone. When it detected the FPV transmission signature, the system immediately blasted interference across multiple frequency bands, attempting to degrade the link between drones and operators. Its mission was unmistakable: crush the control signal, wreck navigation stability, force the FPVs to lose video, drift from their dive path, or crash before reaching the train. In those seconds, the contest became more than a race between drones and target. It transformed into a direct clash between Ukraine's guidance capability and Russia's final EW layer. The first FPV operator immediately reported heavy interference on the primary control channel, as the interface flashed an unstable connection warning. The nose camera still showed the train, but glitches were already crawling across the screen, proof that Russia's electronic warfare system had locked on to the drone's transmission. 3 miles away, the RB-301B Borisogolebsk 2 was ramping up its jamming power. Initially, the Russian crew deployed broadband jamming, flooding multiple frequency bands simultaneously with high-power interference, attempting to corrupt the entire electromagnetic environment surrounding the train. The goal was simple: fragment the video feed, destabilize control, and push the FPV off its dive path before it reached the fuel cars. When that failed, Borisogledsk 2 shifted to focused jamming. Rather than spreading interference across the full spectrum, the system concentrated energy into the frequency bands commonly used for UAV command and tactical video. Jamming intensity climbed progressively, attempting to sever the connection between Ukrainian operator and FPV, just as it entered the final strike phase. But the Ukrainian control teams had anticipated this exact scenario. The attack drones didn't depend on a single communication channel. They employed backup links, encrypted branches, and dynamic frequency switching to sustain control inside a heavily jammed electromagnetic environment. When the primary channel weakened, the system automatically switched to a secondary channel, preserving the target image centered in the operator's goggles. Meanwhile, the Autel Evo Max 4T continued feeding live reconnaissance data. Maintaining a safe standoff distance, it tracked the fuel train through its zoom camera and thermal sensor, confirming movement direction, speed, and the exact locations of the fuel cars along the Debaltseve line. Even as FPV signals were being hammered by jamming pulses, the reconnaissance platform maintained the overall battlefield picture. Borisogledsk 2 intensified its assault by degrading the navigation signal. Beyond jamming the control link, the system attempted to corrupt GPS data and force the UAV to lose precise positional awareness. But by then, the FPV no longer depended entirely on satellite coordinates. Inside its flight controller, accelerometers and gyroscopes continuously measured heading, pitch, acceleration, and every minute shift in the drone's motion. This inertial measurement system created a backup navigation layer impervious to conventional jamming. It didn't need satellites to know the FPV's bank angle, acceleration direction, or dive vector. When positioning signals deteriorated, the operator reported switching to backup guidance mode. From that point, the nose camera became the decisive instrument. The fuel car body appeared distinctly in the frame, shaking with the train's movement. Image stabilization kept the aiming point locked onto the metal fuselage, while the operator adjusted the dive angle frame by frame. The Autel Evo confirmed the target from distance. The FPV used direct optical feed to maintain final approach. That fusion of reconnaissance data, inertial guidance, and optical control meant Borisogledsk 2 could jam one channel, weaken positioning, but couldn't erase the fuel car from the camera, and couldn't prevent the operator from seeing the target directly ahead. At 4:36 local time, the first Ukrainian FPV slammed straight into the 8th fuel car. The impact lasted an instant, but its destructive force instantly transformed the situation on the railway line. The 6-pound penetrating warhead detonated on contact. The hardened tungsten alloy penetrator punched through the 15mm steel skin, opening a rupture directly in the tank body. Almost simultaneously, diesel fuel inside was violently superheated, triggering a flash fire within the compartment. Temperature at the detonation point exceeded 3,000 degrees Celsius, causing fuel vapor to expand with extreme velocity and generating a pressure wave that tore through the car's internal structure. On the Autel Evo Max 4T thermal screen, the reconnaissance operator saw a massive bright flare erupt from car number 8, then race rapidly along the train's length. The target had been struck. And here's where the situation became catastrophic. The train's very design, optimized for efficient fuel transport, had become its fatal vulnerability. The cars were coupled tightly together. Ventilation and pressure balancing spaces between tanks allowed heat, smoke, and fuel vapor to cascade rapidly into adjacent cars. Just 15 seconds after the first strike, flames from the burning car had already ignited neighboring sections. The Russian train operator slammed the emergency brake, but that action drove the train straight into Ukraine's trap. Once the train stopped on the tracks, it transformed from a moving target into a stationary mass of fuel parked in the middle of the combat zone. Above it, the 5 remaining FPVs were already entering their terminal phase. At 4:38 local time, with the 8th fuel car already consumed by fire, the remaining FPV control crews began their second attack wave. By then, the train had halted on the tracks, transforming the entire 24-car formation into a burning target in the night. The second UAV group's operator selected the first fuel car, one positioned close to the locomotive and still largely intact as flames from the initial strike point spread. 2 FPVs approached from the southeast, closing on both flanks of the target car, flying low through smoke and firelight to mask their dive vectors. The metal body of the unburned fuel car appeared distinctly cooler than the glowing sections surrounding it on screen, helping the operator maintain stable aiming even as visibility deteriorated. The Autel Evo continued its surveillance over the entire target area. Its thermal camera distinguished intact cars from burning ones and transmitted real-time data back to control. Even as smoke, flames, and extreme heat warped the scene, the reconnaissance platform identified which cars still held fuel and which were already consumed. The operator confirmed lock on the first fuel car, positioned directly behind the locomotive as the FPV entered its terminal dive. The impact struck straight into the tank body near the front coupling. The penetrating warhead punched through steel, igniting fuel inside the compartment. Temperature at the blast point exceeded 3,500 degrees Celsius, causing diesel vapor to expand with extreme speed and creating an estimated pressure wave exceeding 80 to 100 pounds per square inch inside the tank. The hot pressure blasted backward toward the locomotive like a hammer of fire, tearing through the coupling area and warping pipes, control cables, and the pneumatic brake assembly at the locomotive's rear. Flames from that first fuel car erupted violently, engulfing the locomotive's rear section within seconds. Heat burned through insulation, damaged auxiliary electrical systems, and destabilized the engine compartment. The locomotive wasn't instantly destroyed, but it had been effectively crippled. The train lost traction, lost mobility, and was trapped on the tracks while fire continued spreading through remaining fuel cars. Simultaneously, the third operator's team selected the train's rear section. They divided the tail into 3 strike zones, targeting several fuel cars still undamaged. The final 3 FPVs approached from the south, hitting cars 12, 16, and 20 in the rear portion. Cars still intact enough to create even larger secondary fires. As they dove in, the train had no maneuverability, no escape space, and no defensive time remaining. The final salvo created 3 more massive fireballs in the rear section. From the ignition point at Car 8, flames had now spread into multiple sections of the formation. What had been only minutes earlier a fuel supply train heading toward the front line had become a chain of connected fires stretching along the Debaltseve railway line. 3 surgical strikes transformed the fuel train into a full-scale logistics catastrophe. Over 800 tons of fuel were either burned or rendered unusable, enough to disrupt operations of hundreds of Russian military trucks, armored vehicles, and supply transports for many days. What was supposed to reach the front line now burned on the railway tracks at Debaltseve. The blaze was no ordinary fire. Temperatures at blast points exceeded 3,500 degrees Celsius, creating powerful convection currents that drew air into the flame base and drove a black smoke column more than 160 feet into the night sky. Secondary explosions continued rippling through remaining fuel cars, scattering red-hot metal fragments hundreds of meters across the rail line. Infrastructure damage proved even more catastrophic. Rails heated until they bent and twisted. Wooden sleepers burned into charcoal. Signal cables were severed. The train's braking and coupling systems were destroyed. The area around the junction was carpeted with burning fuel, warped steel, and destroyed rail cars. Even after the fire was finally suppressed, Russian repair teams would still need to replace rails, clear wreckage, inspect the trackbed, and restore signaling before the line could operate again. That process could stretch from days to weeks, especially if the area remained under threat from Ukrainian UAVs and long-range artillery. Personally, I think this is where the strategic implications really become clear. Tactically, this strike didn't simply destroy a train. It strangled a critical link in Russia's Donbas fuel supply chain. Tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, self-propelled artillery, and transport trucks all require fuel to move, resupply, and maintain offensive momentum. When fuel burns directly on transport routes, pressure doesn't stay at logistics depots. It surfaces immediately on the front line, where every liter of diesel determines whether a unit advances or gets forced to halt. Debaltseve is a vital rail and road junction, linking Russia's rear to operational axes across Donbas. Striking this location meant Ukraine didn't need to confront Russia's entire armored force directly. Instead, it attacked its lifeblood. An armored convoy without fuel is merely dozens of tons of steel waiting for resupply. The second consequence: Russia must now disperse its air defense network. When rear logistics routes are no longer secure, systems like Pantsir, S-300, or electronic warfare units cannot focus exclusively on protecting the front line. They must be pulled backward to guard bridges, roads, railway stations, fuel depots, and transport junctions. That thins the defensive layer elsewhere and opens fresh gaps for Ukraine's next strikes. Perhaps the most significant impact resides in psychology. This fire broadcasts a crystal-clear message. Areas Russia has controlled for years, including logistics routes deep behind the front line, are no longer absolutely secure rear zones. If Ukraine can locate a train, track it for hours, and strike it at the exact right moment, then every other fuel depot, transfer station, and supply convoy becomes a potential next target. It all started with just a few small UAVs, yet the outcome was a 24-car train disabled, hundreds of tons of fuel destroyed, a critical railway line paralyzed, and Russia's entire logistics network in the Debaltseve area placed on high alert. If you found this breakdown helpful, leave a comment below. In your judgment, how could sustained strikes on fuel and logistics reshape the pace of Russian operations in the coming days? Don't forget to like, subscribe to support future analysis, and share this video with others. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.